To me, there's a definite need to have goal setting because we first have to establish the motivation for why we want to change. And to me, that motivation needs to result in a clear goal we're trying to obtain. And then once we have that motivation or that goal we're shooting for, the second thing you have to do is put a system in place so that you can monitor your behavior and tracking your progress towards that goal. And I think the third component is willpower. Whether your goal is to lose weight, kick a smoking habit, get rid of sugar from your diet, study more, spend less time on social media, willpower is one of the absolute most critical steps to achieving the outcome.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Thank you so much for being here. If you are new here, especially thank you for trying this, and I hope you will enjoy the show. Today I have with me John Miles. He's a dynamic thought leader, award-winning author, and globally renowned podcast host. A former naval officer and Naval Academy graduate, John spent years in the C-suite of international business before embarking on a deeply personal journey toward intentional living. His discovery led to the creation of the Passionstruck podcast, which quickly became a global phenomenon with over 45 million downloads. John's award-winning book, Passionstruck, inspires millions of readers and listeners worldwide to embrace the science of internationality and transform their lives. Today, we talked about passion, of course. We talked about dealing with change. We talked about dealing with challenges and creating new habits, overcoming fear, and igniting your passion. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, let me know. You can also find me on orionsmethod.com. And always remember that even if you didn't subscribe, I still love you. And I still hope that you have a phenomenal day and that you really, really get something amazing, or even just like one little aha moment or inspiration, something that will brighten up your day from today's episode. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hey, John, and welcome to the show.
Orion, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here with your audience, and I've been so excited for this. I was looking forward to it all weekend.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation too. And before we begin, maybe you can tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you discover your passion?
So I have really lived three different lives. And I think one of the core messages I love to share is that we now more than ever need to reinvent ourselves. And it's going to become an even bigger priority for those who are in the next generations to come. But I first started out serving in the military. I was a naval officer for a number of years, left that to actually become an FBI agent. And
Goodness, so exciting.
yeah, my class ended up getting recycled 2 days before I was supposed to go because of a congressional funding shortage.
Mm.
And it ended up causing me to take a completely different path than I thought I would. So I ended up going into industry for the next 25 years and spent time first as a management consultant for a couple firms, Booz Allen, then Arthur Andersen Consulting. And then I ended up going into traditional Fortune 500 companies, and I worked for common names that people would know, Lowe's, Dell. And then from there became the chief operating officer of a billion-dollar company and then the CEO of two or three companies. But all along, as I was getting more senior in my career, I really felt that I was getting this calling to do something different that kept showing up. And in 2021, I decided to take that plunge and to cross the chasm of doing what I was completely passionate about um, in the background. And I started Passionstruck, which is a media company that hosts the Passionstruck podcast, my
Mm-hmm.
book, and in the future, more podcasts, books, coaching, and other things.
That's incredible. Going back to your military time, how do you think your military service shaped you to be this very powerful entrepreneur and coach, teacher, author, podcast host that you are today?
So yesterday I got to go to one of my favorite events. Here in the Tampa Bay area, we have something called the Frogman Swim, which occurs in January, where participants swim in 50-degree water to honor fallen or service injured Navy SEALs. And this has been going
Mm.
on for 17 or 18 years now. But they started another fundraiser called the Frogman Feast, and that was yesterday. And it's this great event where they have chefs from 25 of the nicest restaurants in Florida who come
Nice.
in and each create a top up for you to sample, and the winner gets a really cool award. But all of it is benefiting the families of the Navy SEAL Foundation. And I happened to be talking to uh, one of the team guys who was there, and we were talking about this very concept of what we both learned the most from the military.
Mm.
And I think it's this whole concept that you need to see challenges in your life almost like a rubber band. And we were talking about going through buds training and going on some of the missions that we were on. And there are times when the challenges you are facing are so extreme that your rubber band really condenses to the point
Mm.
that you've got to put mind over matter for that succinct period of time to get through
Mm.
whatever that challenge is. And other times your challenge expands like a rubber band, where maybe you're at buds training and it's the afternoon and you know you're going to go through a classroom training and it's not as arduous as some of the other periods you've had before. And so then your time horizon goes a little bit further. And this is something I have really learned in my life, is that you have to have that perspective, because we're all going to be facing challenges, and it's building up that resilience to get over both the short period of challenge in our lives and the longer duration ones, and knowing how to respond to that. And that's something that I definitely learned from my military training.
That's amazing. Yes. I served in the IDF, and what I learned, I mean, what I'm taking with me or took with me, hey, I think it's kind of like you enter as a almost like a child, and you live like an adult, and you learn discipline. You like it changes you completely, in a really good way, I think. And I also understood the value of 30 seconds and what it can do in 30 seconds. Because in our basic training, it was always like 30 seconds, do this, 30 seconds, do that. I was like, wow, you can do so many things in 30 seconds. I did not even know that. That's amazing. With your book, like, how did you come up with your book? What was the inspiration for that?
Well, it reminds me of a quote from Sharon Salzberg. I'm not sure if you're familiar with who Sharon is, but
No, not.
she's really one of the top authorities in the United States on um, mindfulness,
Mm,
and
I need to know about her.
studied under the Dalai Lama, and really is at the forefront of conscious engagement. And she has this quote that I love: "There's no commodity we can take with us. There's only our lives, and whether we live them wisely or we live them in ignorance, and this is
Mm,
everything." And my book really ties into that concept. A lot of times people ask me, what would you tell, John, who's 23, 24, just going into the military service? And I would tell him to read my book, Passionstruck, because I really wrote it um, for many different populations, but one of them was to give my kids, who are now 20 and 26, the
amazing.
keys that I learned so they could shortcut so many of the mistakes I made, but more importantly, to find a way that they could live their life wisely, and trying to figure out how they can pursue the steps that will lead them to self-realization, or as Maslow says, self-actualization. So that's what the
Mm,
book is really about. It's 12 principles that get you closer to your self-realized self.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can share some of those principles. What do you think is one of them that everybody are missing out?
Well, one of the favorite ones that people always ask me about is the mosquito audit. It's the mosquito principle, but it's really becoming a mosquito auditor.
Mm,
And I'll give you the metaphor behind what this is I was writing this chapter, and really what I'm talking about is invisible influences in our lives that can really take us down the right path or the wrong path.
mm-hmm.
And I was really trying to think of how could I use a metaphor to explain the impact of this. And I happened to be listening to a radio show, and the announcer came on and said, "What is the most dangerous animal on the planet?" And everyone was guessing, a lion or a shark or this or that, the same things that were going through my head, maybe a poisonous um, snake, or what am I thinking of? A spider. And what it actually is the mosquito. The mosquito kills more people in a year than all the sharks together will in about 100 years. It
Wow.
it comes out to 1 million to 2 million lives every single year. Yet when
Wow.
you think of a mosquito, it's so benign, we oftentimes don't even know it's there until it bites us, or we might feel its presence, but we don't really think about the harm it can do. And the
Mm,
same thing is true with the human mosquitoes around us. So in this chapter, I really go through the story of Oprah Winfrey and Titus O'Neil, who's a professional world wrestling star. And I talk about the three types of mosquitoes that I decided to profile, which are the bloodsucker, the invisible suffocator, and the pain in the ass. There are
mm,
many more types than that, but I thought that those three types everyone could resonate with. That person that we know who's trying to steal all the blood that they can from us for their own personal gain. The invisible suffocator, who is that person who,
loves us to death.
yes, and then the pain in the ass. And really, what I try to get people to do is to think about looking at a target, since we're talking about the military, and think about the bullseye and the rings outside of it, and who are those people in your bullseye, those
Mm,
3 to 5 people closest to you, and are any of them one of these three types of mosquitoes. Then expand it from there. And because once you know, it's a true blessing, because then you know that you're going to have to put boundaries up or eliminate those mosquitoes if they're really having a severe impact on your life, and do something about them.
mm. Did you have your own personal lessons of putting boundaries? Because you seem like a very kind person, like super tough, but also extremely kind. Did you have any lessons about boundaries?
Well, I mean, I've had tons throughout my life, and sometimes the boundaries you have to put up are with some of the people who are closest to you. So, there have been times where I have had to move friends or friend groups to one of the outside circles, because they're negatively impacting where I want to take my life, meaning the activities that they're consumed in, they're fun, but they're not intentionally leading me to where I want to go. So when that is what's filling your life and your time, um, that is where you're going to focus it. And so something I really try to use is Eisenhower's matrix, where you look at two major quadrants of your life. What are you putting your money towards, or your pocketbook, and what are you putting your calendar towards? Because those two things are typically what you're equating to what's most important. So it's really learning to prioritize what's truly important and what's urgent for you to get done. And oftentimes, you're consuming your life with things that don't fit that criteria, and so you've got to put up a boundary and move away from them.
Right. I feel like there is also some kind of grief that is um, showing up when you have to let go of people. Sometimes you have to let go of people you don't really want to let go of, but it's not good for you. And it's almost like, for me personally, it's almost like a process of, okay, we had a really good time. It was amazing connection. We were great back then, and now it's time, like, I'm in a different place and I need to choose to move on.
Yeah. Well, and I think it naturally happens with
Hmm.
people from like high school, maybe some of the people we went to college with. But as time goes on, it's more difficult to do it with those people, like you're saying, who you develop a connection with. And maybe during that period of time, it's the right connection. But then you set your sights on a purpose that you're trying to strive to meet, and they are just living their life, or have characteristics that are going in a completely different direction. And sometimes those relationships are difficult to break up, but it could be what's very much holding you back from the most important goals that you have to achieve in your life.
Right. Um, I'm not sure this is a quote from Tony Robbins, but that's where I heard it. Where you're the average of the five people you hang out with, and that's why you have to really choose your peer group, because it doesn't matter what your passion is. If you're in a bad environment, it's going to affect you, unless you are, I don't know, the man of steel.
Yeah, absolutely correct.
Yeah, the environment definitely affects you. So when somebody wants to find their passion, how do they create the right environment for themselves? Like, sometimes, like, I wish to hang out with some people that the feels like far away, um or unreachable, or I'm like, oh, I wish I was in that group. What do you do to be in the right peer group?
Well, I think you can't just expect that one day you're going to be there. Meaning, let's say you want to be in Tony Robbins' circle. You've got to be really intentional about the steps that you're going to take.
Oh, just pay $150,000 a year and you're good. That's it. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I think of it as more, we are so much closer to anyone in the world than we even realize, through our networks. And yet we don't utilize the networks to full effect. So if I wanted to reach Tony, I would look at my network to who would be the people in closest proximity, not necessarily to Tony, but people who are close to Tony. For instance, you could look at someone like Eric Edmeades, who shares the stage with Tony on many occasions, and Eric is much more accessible. You could even take one of his training classes on public speaking, or if you're into alternative health, uh, double down on what he's doing about the ancient ancestral diets, and develop a relationship with him. And through him, you have a much higher probability of meeting Tony Robbins in that example. But you'd get to meet Eric Edmeades, who's a super incredible person and has got a great community as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's way to get to people. And I mean, like, I actually know people from the inner circle there. Where my husband used to be a platinum member, and we, so I kind of know this world. And I know that there is a way to get places where you join a very high level mastermind, or you contact the person that contacts the person, and then you get there. Um, so with finding your passion, I'd say you found your passion, but then there is also imposter syndrome, and who I am, and why would they listen to me? Something that I personally sometimes struggle with. Getting better though. How do you get over that?
So I think this is one of the biggest roadblocks that we have, and it's really a mindset shift, going from fear of what we think we can accomplish. And I'll go back to one of your guests that you had. I can't remember his name, but he was the gentleman you and I were talking about before the show, who had found himself in prison. It's a great episode for anyone who wants to listen to it. Yeah, well, he was talking about that fear is a physical element, and I kind of agree with him that there is the fear of a physical harm, but there's also the fear from a psychological standpoint, meaning we were talking about buds before. You could have the fear even before you get in the pool that you might suffocate during one of their drills. And that's a
Hmm.
psychological fear that you have. And oftentimes, that fear of drowning is a huge fear, but we have fears of public speaking, or we have fears of putting ourselves out there on a podcast, or we have fear that our words might not be elegant enough if we write a book. There's so many fears we have. And I think the first thing you got to do to confront it is to start looking at what's on the other side of it. Meaning, I have uh, uh, from traumatic brain injuries that I've had and from some other life experiences, I have a speech impediment and some cognitive issues. And so for me, public speaking has been something that I've wanted to do my whole life, but I'm extremely nervous about, because at any time I could misspeak or my speech impediment could come through. And so you could choose to not speak at all and to live in that vacuum, or you can choose to put yourself out there, like I have done with the podcast, having to do this 3 times a week. But on top of that, I did improv classes, I went to Toastmasters, I did everything I could to put myself in uncomfortable positions so I would screw up before I screwed up on a large stage, so to speak. And the more you train yourself, and I have to tell you, the first public speeches I gave, the first podcast episodes, they weren't great, but you learn from them and you start seeing your mistakes and you get over that fear. It's the same thing for anything you want to face. Meaning, if you know you're going to BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition School, and you know that drowning could be a phobia you have, then to prepare for it, one of the things you could do is to start learning how to hold your breath. And that's what I was talking to this gentleman about yesterday. It's a fear that he had before he went to BUDS. And so even before he got there, he learned how to hold his breath for over 4 minutes. And why that was so important is he could hold his breath longer than any of the instructors could. So he knew he was going to be able to outlast anyone. And so it no longer became a fear for him. That's how you've got to approach the fears that impact your life.
Yes. I approach my fears heads on. Always did. Go like, okay, this is hard. Let's do it. This is not normal. Let's do it.
Well, a guy you've got to have on the podcast, Orion, and I'll introduce you to him, is Scott Simon. Scott wrote this fantastic book called Scare Your Soul, and he is all about challenge exercises to help people confront their fears. Uh, and I love it because he does things that are maybe a couple steps outside of where they feel comfortable but are achievable, and he puts these things out to his community all the time. So that is a great way for people to do it, is to create challenge exercises for yourself to face the fear that you might have.
Yes. I went to many self-development seminars. I walked on hot coals. I walked on glass. I broke an arrow with my neck. I broke boards. I jumped from a telephone pole.
Wow, look at you.
Yeah, yeah. When you do those things, you do feel like, hey, I can I'm stronger than I actually think I am, and you get motivated, and then you forget that you're actually great, and then you do it again to remember that you're great, and then you forget, and then do it again, and maybe one day I'll stop forgetting. Um, do you know of the tough mudder?
Yes.
Yeah, so I did that one too.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah. Oh, you've done that. That's amazing. So we did that in New Jersey, and it was 50 degrees. No, it was 30 degrees outside. And the first obstacle was the Chernobyl jacuzzi where you're going to the ice water bath. And that was we were so cold. Like our team at the end of the race, we got our headbands and our beer, but we have like this like forced smile. We were like shaking. I couldn't peel the clothes off of me. It was really cold. But that was, when you do things like that, hey, you got a story to tell to impress somebody who you used to be in the Navy SEAL. I was like, hey, yeah, look at me, I've done it. Hey, but also gives you a sense of power and empowerment, and that you can move forward. Do you challenge yourself a lot? It seems like you do.
I do, and it's something that I try to share in my newsletters every week is I try to organize my week of episodes. And congratulations to you for 8+ years of doing this podcast.
Thank you.
For those who aren't podcasters, they don't realize how much effort that is.
Look, see, you gave me that compliment. I felt like my shoulders went back and my chest went up, and I felt so proud of myself. Thank you, darling. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, well, doing almost 400 episodes like you have is no small feat. So I almost think when I think of my own time doing a podcast, I almost look at the episode count more than I do the downloads, because that's where that effort comes in. But what I was talking about is I try to orient my topics for a week so that they align to the solo episode that I'm doing. And then in my newsletter, I try to give the audience who reads it 7 days of challenge that they can do for that episode. So, for instance, last week my episode was on psychological wealth, and I had two episodes that kind of went into that. Psychological wealth is really um, getting over the quiet desperation that so many people feel today, where they're putting so much of their focus on thinking that their success and happiness are being driven by external matters of what they think is going to make them happy, as opposed to psychological wealth, which is really that inner guidepost, that inner flame that's really igniting their purpose. And so I gave a challenge exercise on 7 days of building your psychological wealth, but I really wanted this to go further beyond that. So I created a year-long guide that people could use as well. So that's how I try to do it. And I put myself through the same challenges that I put the audience of the show through.
Mm. What's the fire behind your passion? Is that your kid, or is it your kids and something else?
No, I got a calling at this point, probably around 2007, 2008, during my time at Lowe's. I was probably, it was probably the first time that I had truly done a deep investigation of the Bible. I was going to a Methodist church at the time. I was raised Catholic, and I'm still Catholic, but I was wanting to try something different to get me closer to religion. And so they have this class called discipleship. And discipleship one, these are like 36-week long classes. You meet twice a week in the evening. It's not a trivial thing, but discipleship one, you go through the whole Bible. Discipleship two, you go through the New Testament. Discipleship three, you go through the Old Testament. But it was really eye-opening for me, because the pastor who taught it, in addition to having a PhD in theology, had a PhD in history. And so he was really able to take the stories from the Old Testament, let's just say, and to fast forward to today, and to kind of show you what was happening historically and how to think about this today in the world that we live in. And it was the first time, I have to say, that I actually read every single word of the Bible, or listened to it, because I would listen to a lot of it on my commute, and really studied it. And during this time, I really developed a more mindful practice of my own self-awareness, but trying to listen to the inputs that I was getting. And I started to hear a calling then, that I was being asked to help the beaten, broken, bored, lonely, helpless of the world. And I'll tell you, when you're a senior executive in a Fortune 500 company and you get that message, you're like, what in the world are you talking about? Who are these people? How am I supposed to help them, etc.? And given that I had just heard all these stories from the Old Testament, I think that's how many people back then felt when they were tapped on the shoulder and said, I've got a mission for you. And it's very uncomfortable. And you're going to, and I found what I did is instead of accepting it, I pushed back on it. And I pushed back on it for a number of years, trying to really figure out what I was supposed to do. And it finally worked its way out about 7 years ago that all those things that I talked about are symptomatic of a society who I think lacks meaning in their lives. I think we have chronic unmattering that is impacting so many people, especially in this disease of disconnection world that we live in, where so many people are so, I guess, inundated by the distractions of living their life like they're in the game of pinball, just bouncing off of the things that they encounter, that they're not being intentional. And I love this about your show, to live out loud. They're not living the life that they were put on earth to do. And so for me, it was 2 years of really doing the work on myself that led me to, I'm supposed to be helping this community of people who feel like they want to have more significance in the world. They want to feel like they matter, not only matter to themselves, but matter to others. And most importantly, making others feel like they matter. And so that is really what I've been trying to do with everything related to Passionstruck.
Yeah. It's really stepping out of your comfort zone. I bet your job was very, well, maybe not easy, but familiar and easy-ish because you knew it. And then you step into, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to help so many people, which you do. So I'm really happy that you listen to the calling. How do you suggest somebody who's listening now connect to their calling or listen, or is there a spiritual practice that you recommend?
Well, whether you practice religion or not, I think it all comes down to you need to develop a practice of mindfulness. It all comes down to self awareness. In order to matter to anyone else or to help others matter, you first have to learn how to matter to yourself. And I think back to your where you were asking me about imposter syndrome and our fears and everything else, we let so much of that invade our inner person that over time it starts to suffocate out our very self, our very spirit inside. And so the only way you can get back to that is you have to do the hard inner work to allow, whether it's the spirits in the universe, God, however you want to think about it, into your life so that they can guide you to where you need to go. Because I truly believe that we are all put here for a very specific mission. And I believe from a spiritual perspective, what we're doing here is we're living in Earth School, and we have very specific things that we are supposed to accomplish. And when we are accomplishing them and we're going on the right path, I think our lives tend to go pretty well. When we're fighting against it or we're not doing the things that we're asked to do, I think that's where we stumble or impact or have challenges or misfortunes impact us. And so it's really listening to that inner guide and trusting it and then starting to take action. And I think that's the hardest thing is one, figuring out this path that you want to go on and then learning how to take the actions to accomplish it, which is really what I explore throughout the book. And this all comes down to the micro choices that we make every single day.
How do you get out of bad habits?
The same way you get into good habits.
Well, what's that way?
Well, let me put it this way. I think we tend to look at mega events in our life, and we think that it's those mega events, whether it's getting married, graduating from a school, going through boot camp, whatever these events are. And I think those are all important. But I think we don't think enough about the choices that we make every single day. And a great way to think about this from my time in the military is when we were going on an operation, we get hyper focused about what's going to happen at the point of the operation itself, that we don't put as much attention on the ingress and the egress. And what I have found when I was in combat is that we had more injuries, more fatalities going to the operation or from the operation than we did in the actual operation, because you're not you're not being as intentional during those moments because you're kind of putting yourself into autopilot. And I think the same thing goes with our lives. When we're just living our daily life, we're not being conscious about the choices that we're making. And it's really being deliberate about the choices that you want to make. All it takes is start making one or two different choices a day to either break a habit or create a new habit. So if you want to get out of the habit of eating sweets per se, there are those choices that are going to come to you in any given day where you're going to feel the urge to want to eat sugar. So it comes down to that choice. Now, you can choose to make that choice and to do it all at one time and try to cut cold turkey, which is going to be much more difficult. Or you could give yourself choices that maybe this week I'm going to permit myself to have sugar 3 times instead of 7 times. And then once you do that and you do it for a couple of weeks back to back, you're making progress. And then from there, you can say, I'm going to do it 2 times a week. And then from there, you can say, I'm going to do it 1 time a week. And then maybe you say, I'll allow myself to have a treat 1 time per week or 1 time per month. That's how you get out of a habit or you create a new habit.
Right. I think it's also a matter of personality because some people, for them, cutting everything cold turkey is much easier than when they're just doing the little things every day. And it's also a mindset perception where, oh, poor me, I'm a victim. I don't have to eat. I really want this, but I can't have it. And then you have this inner struggle, or you see it differently, you frame it differently as, oh my god, I'm so proud of myself, this is me getting healthy. And every time you see sugar, it's actually an anchor for, I am amazing for not eating it, rather than I'm a victim for not eating it. So you shift that mindset, and then it may be easier to deal with, in this example, eating sugar or doing anything else that might be harmful for you.
Or maybe you use it as a reward mechanism. Maybe you set up a criteria for, if you do something exceptional, that's your doing that is your gift of allowing yourself to have a treat, whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah. So I want to ask you about your quiz on your website. And I got the result of my quiz, and I cannot somehow, I don't open I took a screenshot of it, and I can't, it's not opening for me. But I remember getting a score of 82, which is probably good. Um, so it's called the Passionstruck Quiz. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
So, in the book, I wanted to give the reader an opportunity to understand once I. So, the way that the book is organized is it's organized in the first section on mindset shifts. The second section is behavior shifts. And this is all going against a model, the Passionstruck model. So, and I wanted in the third section of the book, once I've taught the principles, to show you how you put them into actual action in your life. Because I think that there's so many books that I've read where they kind of lay out principles, but then they stop short of then telling you how do you implement them. So I was trying to give a mechanism to show a reader a way to gauge where they currently are and then where they want to go. And so in the book, I go through a series of different levels that you can go to. And it starts with the subsister, goes to the imitator, then goes to the vanquisher, the orchestrator, and the creative amplifier.
Oh, I think that's what I got. I think I got creative amplifier. Yes.
So let me just go through each one. The subsister is someone who feels a lot of apathy in their life. They're indifferent. They're self-centered, and they're gripped by an overwhelming fear of change and settling for comfort or the status quo. The imitator is someone who tends to be conforming. They're driven by ego and the need to fit in, and they really fit into group or societal norms. The vanquisher is ambitious and relentless, constantly striving for personal success and determined to conquer obstacles on the path to greatness, but they're not really trying to solve world issues. They're trying to really, it's still, they're more focused on individual success than the success that they can bring to others. The orchestrator is someone who's balanced and visionary. They have more of a managed ego and a genuine concern for the world, actively seeking out systematic change and progress. And then the creative amplifier is kind of at the top of the pyramid for what I created. And they're conscious and humble, fully engaged with a world centric perspective, resilient in the face of challenges, and really empowered to realize their self, really their self realized self. So those are kind of the five different criteria. And what the quiz was doing is gives you an indicator of where on that path you currently sit.
That's awesome. Because yeah, as I was reading the questions, I didn't know about those. Was it 5 levels? But I looked at myself and I thought that wow, my answer has probably changed from different times in my life where actually things that I think that before I become a mom, I was more of the last one where you know I didn't care and I faced challenges even with more bravery or stupidity. But since I become a mom, I'm more I'm more responsible or even more fearful, and things changed. I'm more maybe it comes with age. I don't know, where I don't head on with everything that's going on and like hooray and yeah, because now I have more responsibility in my life. And I think that when you look at those avatars that you created, we're all one or the other at some point of our life, or even at some points in the day, right?
No, it's absolutely true, and you could be a creative amplifier and have something happen to you which brings you back down to one of the lower levels. Meaning, earlier in my career, when I was in the military, I was more an imitator because I was really driven by a culture that was conforming, and I felt a need to fit in because of the military groups I was associated with, and so I was adhering more towards the norms of that community. So different life stages can fit into this, but I think what I'm trying to show is to become self-realized, you really have to let go of the ego and you have to take a more world-centric view because I think we're all put here to serve others, and so that's the key thing that I'm trying to drive throughout the whole book.
Yeah, beautiful. um and even when you are a creative creator, it doesn't mean that you don't have hard days or cry or struggle or have like this internal conflict. It's just a part of the human nature. You still experience all your emotion, and you still have all those challenges, maybe just on a bigger level. You're just more equipped, I think, to deal with it. And maybe you don't stay in the negative emotion for as long as you used to.
You don't, and one of the most important things that I talk about in the book is a lot of people talk about the need to take action, but what I tried to do is go down on it deeper. We hear words like action, ambition, aspiration, and we think that they're independent variables. We think they're isolated, they're actually interconnected. They're not interdependent. So that's one of the most important things we've got to realize is when our actions support our intentions and our intentions align with our aspirations, we become unstoppable. And it's really learning how to put those habits in place to align those, and then to put a belief system around all of it so that that becomes your North Star when you align those three things together.
Mm. How do you suggest one will rewire their brain and create new beliefs and new connections in their brain that will give them more success or discipline or passion to move forward?
So this is an area I wish I would have spent more time in the book talking about. There's actually a great book that's coming out by Caroline Miller that goes deeper into goal setting. And I'm not talking the goal setting theories that most of us have been brought up with KPIs, etc. She really goes into the science of goal setting. But to me, there's a definite need to have goal setting because we first have to establish the motivation for why we want to change. And to me, that motivation needs to result in a clear goal we're trying to obtain. And then once we have that motivation or that goal we're shooting for, the second thing you have to do is put a system in place so that you can monitor your behavior and tracking your progress towards that goal. And I think the third component is willpower. Whether your goal is to lose weight, kick a smoking habit, get rid of sugar from your diet, study more, spend less time on social media, willpower is one of the absolute most critical steps to achieving the outcome.
Beautiful. And I don't remember who said it, where you have more willpower in the morning, and then when you get later in the day, you have less. So you might want to do your major tasks in the morning when the willpower is still strong in you. But it's not true for everybody, for sure.
It's definitely true for me. That's why I front load my day with workouts, anything I have to do for writing or like writing an episode for the podcast or writing a book or important things that I have to get done. I put them first because you're right. As the day goes on, you at least for me, I lose that drive and energy to complete them.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what are your three top tips to living a stellar life?
My top three tips. I think the first one would be to do this exercise. Think of yourself sitting on a kitchen stool and think about the legs underneath the stool and what makes up the support that's holding you up currently in your life. Then think about your future self, and do those support structures underneath you, are they the same? Meaning, there was a point in my life where I felt a lack of significance. I felt like I was kind of just going through the motions. I was bored with work. I felt apathy myself. And I realized that one of the major supports that was carrying more weight than the other supports and putting me out of balance was the constant grind. I was constantly so busy that I wasn't giving myself space for myself and for really equating the things that were most important for me in proper balance, meaning I had to shift my own stool to be more focused on my physical health, my mental health, my relationship health, my emotional health, because those things were lacking. And when they lack, you're completely out of balance. So that's a good exercise for doing that. I think the next thing that you have to do when I think of a tip is you have to figure out how do you cultivate self-compassion. So a practice where you treat yourself with kindness, especially in moments of failure or inadequacy, because everyone makes mistakes. And to me, it's every huge, I guess, progression that I've had in personal growth comes from those moments. Meaning, recently, or a couple of months ago, we had hurricanes here in this local area, and my house got impacted by 3 feet of water, and I lost everything. So you could either look at that moment and just dwell on the negativity, or you can practice kindness and gratitude for the things that filled you up, and gratitude for the fact that you get to start over and rebuild those things in your life. And I think the third step for me would be, you've got to really develop a practice of defining success on your own terms. Meaning, don't listen to the world when it comes to your goal setting. Learn how to set goals that align with your personal values and bring intrinsic satisfaction, rather than those primarily aimed at gaining recognition or, more importantly, approval from others.
That's beautiful. And where can people find you and take the quiz and get your book, listen to the podcast?
Well, Orion, thank you so much for having me. It is such a joy to be on your podcast, and it's such a great show.
Thank you. It's a joy having you. You're amazing. Thank you.
The best place people can go is, if you want to learn more about Passionstruck, go to passionstruck.com. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to johnrmiles.com. And on the social platforms, I'm in both places.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you very much. I'm sure you inspired a lot of people that are listening right now. And thank you, listeners. Think about who is going to be the support system for your future self. Practice self compassion, self love. Like Louise Hay says, when something bad happens, go to the mirror and say, I love you. I love you no matter what. So if something good happens, you love yourself. Something bad happened, you love yourself, because it's really, really important. You have to have your own back. And define success on your own terms. Don't listen to outside voices. Just do you. It's the most important thing. And have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.